children when trying to do a nature study lesson, so you end up just not doing it at all. In this video, I'm going to share with you some really great tips that I've learned from other mamas and that I have also implemented myself and learned the hard way on how to get nature study done with small kids and not lose your mind. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you want more videos about nature study and how to get nature journals done with your children. So when we're talking about nature study, there's really 4 different elements that we can implement to get nature study done in our homes. So I talk more about what nature study is in another video, and I'll link down to that below. But for today, let's just kind of look at doing nature study with small children. So we have these tools at our disposal. One, we've got nature walks, getting outside and just walking and looking at things with our kids. And we do have to be present for that. Another is reading about nature with our children. So this can be a read aloud, or it could be an assignment to an older student as well. And another one is observation. So, or doing what's called an object lesson, where you take a specific thing and you study it in a bit more detail, and you let the child study it as well. You're touching it, you might be cutting it in half, you might be looking on the inside. And finally, we have nature journals. So doing our nature journals is another aspect of nature study, but all of these different elements work together to help us understand nature more deeply. And also, these are just different tools that we use to do it. Okay, so when we're talking about doing nature study with small children, we have 3 goals. So goal number 1 is to get in the habit of using a nature journal regularly. So my goal with especially my smaller children, and I'm going to say anywhere from 3rd grade and younger, is getting them to touch their nature journal regularly. So I'll get into more detail about how I do that and the systems that I've created to help make sure that that happens for the smaller ones. The other goal is to get them outside regularly. And I'm sorry to say, we have to get outside with our kids if we want them to be playing outside as well. So that just means either going for a walk, or maybe you're watering the plants, or maybe you're grabbing your book and you're going outside for a period of time on a fairly regular basis. Now, that's why I do nature walks with my kids, or just walk around the neighborhood, because I usually find something else that needs to get done inside the home. Whereas if I get outside and I go for a walk with them, then I'm able to see, okay, this thing needs to be cleaned up, or we need to fix, maybe part of the swing is broken, or there's an area that has bees in it that I need to, get rid of that so that they can play in that area safely. So it's really just maintenance and just checking on their play spaces outside and making sure that it's pleasant, but also me being out with them shows them that that's a worthy place to be. Another goal that we have with doing nature study is to encourage their natural wonder. And I don't know if you've ever been around children, you know that they are always in awe and wonder of the new things that they're discovering. And nature study can really help us continue to foster and encourage that natural wonder as a matter of habit. Because of course we want them to take that wonder into their adult lives, And we don't want to squelch that. So that is just a really great place to intentionally foster that sense of wonder in our children. So we talked about getting outside regularly with your kids. So I think that this could be weekly, sometimes it's daily, and it could even be for larger excursions, such as a field trip with friends or a hiking expedition. What do you do with your family? I would love to hear. Let me know in the comments how you get outside with your kids and what works for you. So one of my favorite tips that I've learned and I'm now going to share with you about getting nature study done with small children is picking one thing to study. The world is so full of a number of things, as Robert Louis Stevenson said. I think that we can get overwhelmed. So if you just pick one thing, such as birds or trees, just stop there. And then when you go outside on your walks, or you're going on a hike, or you're just walking around your yard, you're paying attention to that one thing that you're studying. And then that helps you train your eye and train your thoughts to look more closely at that one thing that you're studying, and that will help you learn more about it. For instance, we studied trees a few years ago, and we have one tree in our front yard that we love. It is a wild cherry tree. It's glorious. My kids can climb it, and the leaves change, it gets flowers. It's the perfect tree. But what we noticed as we studied it throughout an entire year was that there's some particular bugs that like to live on it. And there also is a particular pattern to the bark of the tree. And I didn't realize my kids had really studied that bark. We found a spread, a page of a ton of different bark, and one of my kids comes behind me and goes, "Oh, that's the cherry tree." The child cannot read. And there is a very particular silver pattern and the stripes that go this way on a cherry tree, on this particular cherry tree. So it was really fun to see that child, in studying, climbing the tree, just paying more attention to it, had already begun to differentiate that tree from others. So again, this is what nature study does, is as we get outside more regularly, we start to develop more wonder and get our senses more heightened. So now that you've picked your one topic, it's time to pick a book that you really enjoy, that you can read through with your children over, let's just say, about 12 weeks. It could be 6 weeks. I love to take picture books, such as there's amazing picture books by Gail Gibbons, and I really just read 1 or 2 pages from these books because they are so filled with detail that doing one book in one sitting is just entirely too much. So once a week, we pull out one of these books, and I'll read for anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. It kind of depends on how engaging the story is and how much information is on one page. So if it's maybe telling about pollination, for instance, and then it shows the types of parts of the flower, I'll just stop there and we'll just look at those details more closely, and I'll have my children tell me back what they heard. And then it's more of a discussion. Another tip that I love and use regularly is just asking them one new thing that they've learned from the reading. And this helps create a sense of just, yeah, you don't know everything. And also that back and forth discussion that I would really like to begin to foster, even in the young ones. They could just say one thing that they remember that was something new that they learned. Okay, so another great tip I have for doing nature study with small children is that after you've done that really great reading, then you get your nature journals out and you do a narration drawing in your nature journal from the reading. Now, again, this needs to be looked at more holistically, that we're also getting outside regularly. But it's also okay to go ahead and say, well, you learned about the parts of the flower. So now let's look at this picture. We're going to take this diagram and we're going to copy it into our books. Or perhaps it was a story about a tree and how people interacted with the tree. It could be that maybe they would grow the tree and turn it into a hope chest once the child turns 20 years old. Well, then the child might draw the tree and then draw the hope chest. See how there's an opportunity to have a little bit of variety in our nature journal entries when also we're using not just nature that we're finding outside to copy into our journals, but we're also allowing for the use of books in our nature journals. So I like to start with the reading and then do a nature journal entry after the reading for small children, again, just to get them in the habit of using that nature journal, and then we're not distracted by nature debris everywhere. And they also, I like to, and I'll leave a link in the descriptions, I like to have some type of a coloring page from the thing that we're studying, so that the super tiny ones, I'm thinking like 5 years old and younger, or the ones who get frustrated, can either just color in and then cut and paste that into their book, or they can trace it into their book, so that the small ones who get frustrated more easily, or big ones who get frustrated more easily, have some tools to get something in their journal that day. So this kind of leads us into that you're in charge or going to tell your child what you're going to draw. Now, I'm talking about small children who are just learning how to use a nature journal. Now, remember earlier I said that we want to train our children. One of our goals is to train them to get in the habit of using their journals over time, so that when they're older, they can use their journals on their own. So what we're doing now is we're saying, this is what we're putting in our journals today. Now, some people frown on this because they want it to be child-led. But what I've found in my family is that usually there is some pushback. And as we have the habit of doing these nature journal entries, that pushback goes away and they start to delight in and even ask for some other ideas on what they can do in their nature journals. So what we're doing is we're giving them a broad, wide array of types of journal entries that they can do. And there is, in my ebook that I have linked down below, I have a list of all the different types of nature journal prompts that you can give. You can write, you can copy, you can draw, you can talk about the weather, you can just do a description. So there's all different ways that we can do nature journal entries. And I want to expose my children, especially when they're little, to some various ways on how to input into a nature journal, not just watercolor, which again, that's a skill that they're going to learn separately from doing their nature journal while they're little, which leads me to, okay, so what do you use? What can we use for our nature journals? I love to use just a regular old pencil with an eraser for starters. The reason I do this is because it's much more simple. There's not a lot of mess, and it's less of a barrier for me just to get started. So again, we're talking about really small children getting started. They're perhaps doing an art lesson separately which is called scaffolding, when they're learning how to mix paints and they're really just messing around with the medium and the materials first. So in their nature journals, they can just use a pencil, and then often I'll let them, after they've done the outline drawing, I'll let them then color it in with the colored pencils if they'd like to. But again, the point is getting them using their nature journals on a regular basis. So now you might be thinking, well, that's all good and dandy, but my kid is really messy. And some children are just, they care more, or they have more attention to detail than other children. So I have both. And for my child who is a little bit messier and likes to rush through the work, I have had to just slow this child down and say, okay, let's go through the steps together, but don't get ahead of me, and let's just draw the stem. And we're working off of a coloring page or a line drawing of the image that we're trying to put into our book, usually. And sometimes we'll work off of an actual object, but again, I'm finding that with the smaller child, that gets frustrating. So then maybe we'll say, okay, let's draw the stem, and we'll draw the stem. Okay, we've got that. Now let's draw the leaf. Now let's draw the flower. So we're just walking them through, just trying to help slow the messier child down, because you're not got anywhere else to be. We're going to be right here while we're just going to be together doing this. You don't need to run off and go play with your toys right now. So that just kind of helps everybody slow down. And then I love to also turn on some music. Maybe it's the composer that you're doing for composer study. I also enjoy doing some folk songs around the topic that we're learning about. I always find that fun. And I'll link to, Elizabeth Mitchell has a lot of really great folk songs about nature. So I just love her stuff. So when we're listening to those songs, then it kind of helps calm everybody down, and we all are getting into a little bit of a groove. We have maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes where we can peacefully just input into our nature journals, color, improve on what we've done, and then it's over. That's it. It's no big deal. Now, this whole thing might take 15 minutes if you do 5 minutes for your story, and then 10 minutes for your journal time. Again, we're talking about really small children here. So really keeping the lesson short and simple. And then another lesson separately might be using the actual object that you drew. So say you did flowers, now you're going to get a lily from the grocery store if it's the middle of winter, and you're going to cut it in half and learn about all the different parts of the flower. That's totally fine, but I would do that in a separate lesson, and then they can nature journal that entry. So it's okay for us to say ahead of time what we would like the child to put in their journal, and then we can help give them the tools along the way for them to succeed, so that it's not us and them having a conflict. It's us leading them to truth, goodness, and beauty that they can discover for themselves. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you want more videos about nature study and getting started with nature journals for beginners. See you next time.